Oh, Shvazod Odavari, it's me. Hey guys, sorry about that. I was having some weird trouble with my OBS. Thanks for coming, everyone. It's Sunday night here on the West Coast, and it's time to do a world building stream. It's been a while. Please let me know if you can see me and hear me, okay? We are here, and we are back with more Monsters of Khûm. Yes, I know. You'd think 7 episodes of this wouldn't be enough. Would be enough. But we got a few more monsters to do on my list. How's everybody doing tonight? Welcome. I've been doing a lot of streaming lately, which I think is a good thing. I don't think it's necessarily bad. I'm trying to get back in the habit of doing it. I think this week is the first time when I have streamed all 4 days that I intend on streaming. So I did a Tuesday adventure prep stream. I think. Maybe I missed it this week. No, we did. We did the Voth Keep for my kids' game. And then we did a Thursday Monster Workshop stream. We talked about blights. And then I streamed last night. I played some Sea of Thieves. Went pretty well. There's a highlight video on the YouTube channel. And then today we're doing a monster stream. Or world building stream. So we have done all the streams I'm trying to do during the week, which is awesome. I posted a little Twitter poll just to see what people were feeling tonight. Oops, let me fix that. Just to see what people were feeling tonight. And I knew I wanted to do monsters because I wanted to swing into something kind of easier. I have a planned stream I'd like to do at some point that is a map stream. I recently finished a version of Khûm's map for my home game, which is currently there in Khûm, but in a different time period. And so I kind of want to do a stream where we look at that map and we maybe make decisions about other things that have changed or whatnot for the second age or the third age map, which is when the campaign takes place. But I have to figure that out. The overlay is going to be really different for that, so I'll have to take a look at it. And I didn't want to go through all that trouble today. So today we're just going to do a monster stream. So if you've never come to one of these before, let me give you a little introduction. I am at some point in the sounds like distant future. It's silly how long I've been saying this. I think almost like 2 years. I'm going to be running a dwarven campaign where which will be podcasting, just like we did with our All Hail Yogg Evil campaign, which I am in the stages of scheduling to record the final. Hey, what's up, Jose? Welcome. I'm in the final stages of scheduling to get that recorded. That way we can release it. So there's some tiny speck of light at the end of the tunnel for Helm Crown, but it won't be for a while. Point being that this is the campaign I will eventually be running way down the line. It's called Helm Crown, and it's kind of a dwarven monastic struggle. This dwarven monarchical struggle about this sort of Erebor-esque fallen dwarven kingdom that has been reclaimed, and it's about the different dwarven clans that are kind of struggling for supremacy over this their ancestral homeland. It's big, it's complicated, it's meant to feel a little bit like The Hobbit meets Game of Thrones, kind of like the later half of The Hobbit and everything about the Lonely Mountain and the Battle of Five Armies and all that stuff. It's kind of where we're drawing inspiration from. It's got kind of an Arctic setting. You know, there's a little bit of Gold Rush in there. There's a little bit of Smaug in there. There's a lot of all these different flavors kind of stirred up into this big kind of classic fantasy. The idea was to do, every time I run a campaign these days for fun or for, you know, sort of creative expression, I'm always trying to scratch some itch. And the itch I had for this game is I've always wanted to run a game with 2 parties of players that are both moving around in the world at the same time. And so I've tried to design this campaign in such a way where I will be able to facilitate that. But all of that out of the way, what we're doing today is we're going through a big list of monsters that I made like a year ago. A big list of different monsters that are the Curse of the Monk Monarch, exactly. Monastic monarchical struggle. I made a big list of monsters that I wanted to include in my setting. So our setting is the Dwarven Kingdom of Khûm, which is this like fallen kingdom, very much like Moria or Erebor. And it's got, you know, it's been for the past 500 years, it's been under this perpetual winter. So there's snow everywhere, right? It's this kind of frozen kingdom that is just very slowly starting to come out of its shell. It's thawing now, and it's got, it's like protected by mountain ranges. I feel like anyone who's watched these streams before is like, yes, man, we know all of this. But, you know, it's this classic kind of mountainous, snowy, alpine, northern setting. And what we've been doing on the stream, what's going on, Two Army Kid? Welcome. Is that we've been going through the different monsters that would live in any number of these environments, whether they're subterranean or mountainous or tundra or, you know, Arctic Ocean or whatever. And we are recontextualizing them to make them fit in the context, not just of Khûm, the kingdom, but also the world on Dune, in my homebrew world, a little bit better. Because I kind of have that kind of Keith Baker, if it exists in D&D, it exists in on Dune, is kind of my thinking. That's how he talks about Eberron. And so I like that same notion here. So we have a big long list. We have a 37-page document of all the different types of monsters that can be found in Khûm. Whittling down a list we had that was much longer. And every time I scroll, it messes up the sync, so I apologize. Much longer list. We've just slowly been chipping away, doing like 4 to 5 monsters an episode. And I posted a poll on Twitter about which monster we should start with, picking what I thought were the most classic monsters here. We have the Dryad, the Ettercap, the Frostworm, and then I put the Owlbear. And surprise, surprise, the Owlbear won out. So we're going to start with the Owlbear. We're mainly talking concept in these streams. It's not so much about mechanics, so we might add like, hey, it'd be cool if you know, my version of these monsters had X power, or whatever. Yeah, so we're going to start with the Owlbear, but we might do the other ones later. If there's a monster on this short list here, if you guys can read that you're interested in, let me know, and we can do that one. We have the Cave Fisher, the Giant Bat, or the Dragazar, the Dryad, the Ettercap, the Frostworm, the Ghastboar, the Griffin, the Ogre, the Oni, the Owlbear, which we're going to do. The Quaggoth, I've been curious about. Sprite, and then the Yeti, also paired with a monster called the Tear. Okay, so let's jump over to the Owlbear. Sorry, I know the scrolling's not good for the stream. All right, so we have the Owlbear. Now, the Owlbear is such a classic Dungeons & Dragons monster. You know what? I might get my monster manual so that way I can see the actual lore. But I know that they do this thing in the lore for the Owlbear that I am not crazy about. So I'm curious to see if we will keep that in our version or if we will do something different. I'm going to go grab it. I'll be right back. You know, it only just occurred to me how similar these streams are with my other monster streams, right? Like I have a podcast about monsters and I have a weekly stream about monsters. Can you guys tell that I like monsters a lot? But let's see. So the Owlbear, usually they do this thing with the Owlbear where they talk so much about like where it came from and why it exists and all this stuff. Like, how could such a creature come into existence? Right? Basically purporting this idea that like, it makes sense for a bear to exist. It makes sense for an owlbear to exist. But the notion of an owlbear is just right out. How could we possibly have one? You know, barring the fact that, like, all creatures had to evolve. Or I guess were created by magic. But, like, you know, I'm not the kind of person who gets hung up on stuff like that. Like, some idea of their origin isn't necessarily bad. But I remember even for, like, the bullet, they talk about how, like, the bullet's origin is that it was like an armadillo crossed with a snapping turtle, you know, and then like infused with demon ichor. And it's like, can't there just be a monster that's a bullet? Like, why? It's a fantasy world. I'm okay if there are creatures that exist there that don't exist in my world. You don't have to explain the horrible Island of Dr. Moreau creature that you came up with, right? Like, it's fine. It's fine. So I kind of sometimes feel the way about like the Owlbear. It's the old like wizard did it story. There's a fair amount of lore here for the Owlbear. Okay, so we have, you know, it looks like a bear and an owl. They have a reputation for ferocity, aggression, stubbornness, and sheer ill temper that makes them one of the most feared predators in the wild. That's kind of cool. There's little, if anything, that a hungry owlbear fears. Even monsters that outmatch an owlbear in size and strength avoid tangling with it. For this creature cares nothing about a foe's superior strength as it attacks without provocation. I like that. I think that's something we might preserve. I like the idea of them being very ornery and being very, like, cantankerous. Although I do feel like we have a couple of monsters that kind of scratch that itch already. Let's look up the hook horror. Because I think the hook horror I describe as being basically like a giant subterranean goose. That they're matriarchal and fiercely territorial, akin to a goose in aggressive behavior. Hook horrors are known to hold grudges and will haunt dwarven holds until either killed or appeased. So hook horrors kind of have that. Last week, last time we did a monster stream, we talked about the Chagrin, which is a large and cantankerous subterranean omnivore. It will eat just about anything it gets its bony jaws around: precious metal, fungi, living prey. Ornery dispositions, and will frequently attack with little or no provocation. So we kind of have a couple monsters that scratch this itch. I did write months ago. A few like hooks for the owlbear, ways you might encounter one in the wild. For Khûm, when we're doing a random encounters stream. So an owlbear goes rooting around in the character's camp looking for food. Okay, sure. An owlbear attacks the party, perfectly camouflaged with paw over its beak. So we can talk about that too. And then a yearling owlbear squats by a hole in the ice, trying and failing to catch a seal. So yeah, the conceit, right, is that like in Khûm, because it's this snowy environs, that the owlbears are kind of as they're presented in, I think it's boy, I can't use my words. Rime of the Frost Maiden, right, where they're like polar owlbears. So it's a snowy owl head and a polar bear body. And I think that's probably true of the owlbears that we find in Khûm as well, that they're kind of like Arctic creatures. So I like the idea that they're ornery. That's cool. I'm into that. I think that kind of works with like goes rooting around in the camp and maybe even attacks the party. But we need something a little bit more, like something a little more interesting about them. So there's a couple paragraphs here in the Monster Manual under the heading Consummate Predators. Emerges from its den around sunset and hunts into the darkest hours of the night, hooting or screeching to declare its territory. Search for a mate to flush prey into its hunting grounds. Forests. Makes its den in a cave or a ruin littered with the bones of its prey. It drags partially devoured kills back to its den, storing portions of the carcass among the surrounding rocks, bushes, and trees. The idea of them like liking caves is kind of interesting, right? That feels sort of bear-like and unique. They hunt alone or in mated pairs. A family of owlbears may remain together for longer if the prey is plentiful. Otherwise, they part ways as soon as the young are ready to hunt. Okay, so just kind of like bear stuff, right? Nothing particularly interesting. And then there's a couple paragraphs under a heading called Savage Companions. Although they are more intelligent than most animals, owlbears are difficult to tame. They do have 3 intelligence. Intelligent creature can train an owlbear to recognize it as a master. People of remote frontier settlements have even succeeded in racing owlbears. A spectator's bet is often on which owlbear will attack its handler as they do on which will reach the finish line first. Sure. Elven communities encourage owlbears to den beneath their treetop villages. Hobgoblins favor owlbears as war beasts. Starved owlbear might show up in a gladiatorial arena. Sure, so it's just kind of like generic monster stuff. I wonder if we do a thing where... Because the idea of them is really interesting, that they are both furred and feathered. We have a group in Khûm called Golden Coast Trading Company, and they are a little bit East India, a little bit Hudson Bay, right? So they're kind of all about fur trading and gold prospecting and gunpowder and things like that. What if the thing about Khûm here is that the owlbear pelt is really, really prized in other parts of the world, right? Owlbears are native only to one of the continents, to Rubicos, the kind of mountainous continent, but something about the fur and feathers, right, particularly the white fur and feathers, makes them especially valuable, and so they are prized as pelts. So they're being hunted, potentially not to extinction, but they may be being endangered by the amount of hunting that's happening. I kind of think that gives them a cool place in the world and like plays into what makes owlbears interesting. You guys hear that? There's like a weird vacuuming sound happening outside my apartment window. I don't know if it's showing up on the mic. It's annoying. Okay, so let's try to put that down. So I think otherwise the owlbear stuff is still basically true, right? Like I like the combination of them being hunted for their pelts, but also being ornery and cantankerous. I think that's kind of neat. Ornery and cantankerous. What fearless and ornery? And ornery. Owlbears, or the owlbears of Khûm, are especially prized. Not on the mic? Excellent. Thank you, Charmy Kid. Especially prized for their white pelts and spotted black feathers. Much as Golden Coast likes to hunt them, they like to fight back. Ooh, Owlbear Hide can also be a purpose for Boots of the Hinterland. Yeah, welcome, Shadowhunter. They like to fight back. So I like the idea that they, while they are prized by, but I like it too that it's not even that their hide is like, yeah, exactly. I'd be grumpy too if every two-legged thing I ever see tries to kill me. Yeah, I mean, you're definitely supposed to side with the owlbear there, right? Like, the poacher is obviously the bad guy. But I like the idea, too, that the owlbear pelt doesn't have anything overtly magical about it. Oh, you're right, it is Winterlands. My brain just filled it in with Hinterlands. Like, that just made sense to me. But there's nothing magical about the pelt. I just like the idea that it's a fashion thing, right? Something about it is just like, it's in vogue right now, right? That it makes it even more evil. That it's not like there's like a cool component or something. Not that you couldn't use it for a component. It totally could be. But that like it's mostly popular for like, you know, trim and like muffs and stuff like that, right? It's kind of a luxury item, and that's what sort of makes it even worse. Owlbears in Khûm, or owlbears in Ondune, are notably fearless. They will attack prey much larger and more dangerous than themselves, and often drive away competitors from sheer ferocity. Kind of like a Wolverine thing, right? From sheer ferocity. Located in the Arctic North, their pelts, they more resemble snow owls and polar bears than their temperate cousins. That's like one more little detail about them. I don't really like them as companion animals. I almost want to say they're untamable, right? I feel like owlbears are the kind of creatures that like every player wants to tame, and so like there's maybe that's bad then to say like they cannot be tamed, right? But it makes you think about like zebras. Apparently zebras are like just way too willful and just like will not take taming, right? That like we've domesticated horses, and you know it's kind of that like wolf dog thing, right? That like it's arguable, I guess, that like a zebra is just an undomesticated horse, like, you know, however many millennia or generations past. But I like the idea of kind of going against the grain here, rather than saying like, oh, hobgoblins like to use them and stuff, right? There's a twist when the DM lets them be awakened by druids. That's cool. Sentient owlbear folk help protect snowy woodlands. That's kind of cool. But I like the idea of them being untamable. They are famously untamable. Never been domesticated, never will be. And never will be. Like there's just something about them, right, that they can't be tamed. I'm not going to talk about their origin because I find it to be boring. Let me put down that awakened owlbear idea. The party meets an awakened owlbear who is no less grumpy to see them. Okay, so let's talk about this. So during present day, we know the owlbears are prized by Golden Coast for their beautiful pelts. And they face extinction if... I mean, I actually kind of like the opposite thing, right? So, like, if you think about how that works in our world, right? That, like, okay, if there's an animal that humans want to hunt and essentially harvest for their parts, you know, the slope is always against the animal, you know? And it sense with a hoot, the slope is always against the animal, right? That like if we want rhino horn for whatever reason, rhinos will eventually go extinct, the rhinos are never gonna win that exchange, right? The rhinos are never gonna like rally and defeat us. And not that the owlbears will defeat us, will defeat Golden Coast, but I like the idea that it's actually like going against the poachers. That Golden Coast really wants the pelts because they're really valuable, but part of the reason they're so valuable is that very few people can kill an owlbear. They're just like too difficult to fight, right? They're too powerful. Like a PC has to go out there and fight one. You know, there's only a few PCs in the world at a time. So like half of the demand, it isn't even that like there aren't that many owlbears, it's that they're too hard to kill. Which I kind of think that's great, right? But they prove surprisingly difficult to kill. Difficult to kill, and are thus all the more valuable, right? But that only drives the prices up. So it's like, if an owlbear is hard to hunt, then you don't get a lot of pelts, and by not getting a lot of pelts, it makes the pelts that exist worth more, which makes people want to go out and get more pelts, but they're still harder to kill, right? So maybe eventually you would get to a point where, you know, they'd be sending out like adventurers to kill owlbears to get pelts. I mean, maybe that's a plot hook the characters could pick up, right? But I like the idea that, you know, most people who would hunt an owlbear are like, you know, a low-level NPC. Maybe they've got, you know, survival. Maybe they've got a bow, but that's not going to help you against this thing that's got 59 hit points and multi-attack and whatever. I have a beef with the owlbear in 5th edition, and I don't think it's tough enough. CR3, like, they describe how fearsome of creatures they are, and like, yeah, they're tough, but like, it's that problem of it's such an iconic monster that it feels like it doesn't, all it has is claws and bites. So eventually, I'm assuming we'll end up doing an owlbear episode on Monster of the Week, either because a guest will choose it, which I think is increasingly likely, or because we'll just get to O, and we'll get to the owlbear, and that's something that we can definitely do, is soup up the owlbear so that way it is like worthy of this reputation. Okay, so the question then is about the rest of its history. So in ancient history, oh yeah, that's right. Let's put that in there. Redesign. Thank you, Shadowrunner. Redesign. Shadowrunner made a point about how the snowy owlbear has natural camouflage in snowy environments. Yeah, because that's one of the hooks, right? Is that it does the thing where it covers up its beak with its paw, making it invisible. Give them natural camouflage. Camouflage in snowy environments. Okay, so the question here is, what was their history like? I mean, again, it definitely makes sense to me that no one would be hunting them during the Seven Sorrows, right? So they would have flourished. Maybe they were, like, protected by the orc corps back in the day. Owlbears were protected by orcish corps during this period, who prevented overhunting by zealous humans. Yeah, that's kind of cool. When the orcs dwindled during the Sorrows, the owlbears nonetheless flourished in the cold, the snowy conditions, unhunted by humans. So it's this thing where, like, the orcish corps, the orcs used to live in Khûm, and they still sort of do, but the winters were so harsh after the Seven Sorrows, right? The kind of, like, calamity that fell over Khûm, that some of them retreated into the underground and became Grimlocks, and some of them stayed, but they tend to live in their lycanthropic form. So lycanthropy is a... would that mean that there is a lingering owlbear won't go out of their way to maul an orc? That's kind of interesting. Yeah, maybe there's some residual trust. That's cool. Owlbears trust orcs more than other ancestors. If an owlbear is hungry, it eats what it wants. That's true. More than other people. But yeah, right, the idea that, like, and I didn't necessarily even think that the orcs would, like, engage with the owlbears that much, but the lands that the orcs lived in is also the same place the owlbears would have lived, and so human hunters can't really go into the orcish lands without the orcish permission. Without the orcs' permission, the orcs are less likely to like let them do that, right? But then when the orcs left, the owlbears flourished because there's it's even though there's no people. It gets much colder. It's much easier for them to live or whatever, right? Like they don't have any problem living in those conditions. The orcs couldn't cut it. But they're also then not hunted because humans aren't hunting them anymore because Khûm is essentially abandoned for 500 years, right? Just not going out of the way to eat one. I don't even necessarily think that owlbears eat people. I just like the idea that, and they might, I guess, if it happens, but that like an owlbear will just eat your food, right? Like it smells that you have food, and it's like, I don't want a seal, I want that, and it'll kill you to get to it, right? That it's like, maybe they would eat a person. They probably don't hunt people, because people are difficult or whatever. But this idea of like if you have, a biscuit in your backpack, that like it will go after that. And if you're in the way, it just has to kill you first to get to your biscuit. Anyway, I just like the idea then of the owlbears, being prolific during the Seven Sorrows when there's no one around to hunt them, even though there's no one to protect them. But then now, in present day, when the Sorrows are ended, the owlbears are still numerous, but they're being hunted again. And Golden Coast is having to come to terms with the fact that, like, oh crap, we don't have the tools to hunt these beasts. They're too big, they're too powerful. And, you could even make the argument they were, like, hardened during the Sorrows, so only the biggest, toughest owlbear survived. I kind of like that, too. The conditions were so bad that only the largest, most hardy owlbears survived, making them all the harder to hunt in the future, right? That like the generations that live through the Sorrows are like super owlbears, and that might even explain why their stats are different from the printed owlbear. That's kind of cool. Okay, so threats then, definitely combat. An owlbear might not want to eat you, but it definitely wants to eat the biscuits you've packed in your rations. Like, and that feels very bear to me, right? That like what they're actually interested in are your marshmallows, not necessarily you. They'd eat you in a pinch, sure, but like they like that sugar, You can maybe, that's kind of a cool idea too. They've developed a sweet tooth for human food, a sweet tooth for humanoid food, right? Sugar and what else do they like? Like they like fat and stuff like that. Like they enjoy, or sugar, even like spices, right? Like they like cinnamon and things. Like I think that the idea of them seeking out human food and like digging around in trash and stuff like that is kind of fun. Make them feel like big raccoons, but they're like big CR6 raccoons, right? Like you can't fuck with an owlbear. Okay, great. There's the owlbear. Nice work, everybody. Awesome. Let's cross it off the list. So next up, let's maybe just work our way through the 4 that I posted about. Do we want to do the Dryad, the Ettercap, or the Frostworm? Now I have core honey tarts, halflings. Yeah, exactly. Honey is a great one, of course, classic bear stuff. I think what's funny about owlbears is that I think because they just happen to have owl faces, I think they get treated a lot more like bears than they get treated like owls. Like it'd be fun to give an owlbear a little bit more of owl-like traits, right? Like give them the like head all the way around thing. Give them like make them quieter, right? Like more stealthy. That's interesting. Oh, it feels like a candy company would use them on their packaging. Yeah, they totally would. That's so sweet, Army Kid. That's very cute. So do we want to do the Dryad, the Ettercap, or the Frostworm? Frostworms are interesting because I actually used one in my home game, which is currently in Khûm. I think they're in Wildmount right now. They reprinted in 5th edition in Wildmount. They're an older monster. And I just kind of ran it out of the book. Like, this is how a Frostworm works. But I'd be curious to get into the actual, beats of it. So, Dryad, Ettercap, and Frostworm are the 3. I have an idea for Ettercap, I think, in particular. And Dryads are basically, Dryads. Oh yeah, that's great, Shadowhunter. Yeah, they cough up the bones. Like there's things they can't there's things they can't digest. That's a great touchstone. I love that, Shadowhunter. Like, what are some more owl-like traits that owlbears could have? That feels like a tweet. I might tweet about that tomorrow. That's cool. I don't know. I'm leaning towards Dryad, unless you guys have a different hit. Let's do the Dryad. So Dryads are fey creatures. And Fae in Undune are really interesting because they work differently than they work in other worlds. So Undune has a thing where the most powerful kind of magic is essentially narrative magic. That stories in Undune are real, right? If they're believed enough. Kind of American Gods rules, right? Yeah, let's do the Dryad. Cool. If they're believed enough, these stories come true. Let me grab these this formatting here. So all Fae creatures then are creatures created through the inherent magic of belief, right, and storytelling. If a story is repeated enough, if a story is believed enough, even if it's not, I guess, like believed, like belief is a part of it for sure, but it really honestly just has to be told. Like the more people talk about it, the more true it makes it. No one knows this, of course. This isn't like widely understood. There are probably we always keep getting like right in the middle of this split. There are probably, you know, mages and like crackpots who have this theory. But Fae are basically like stories made true. These are creatures that really exist thanks to the stories that are told about them. So what's interesting then is that like they don't have to obey any of the laws or rules that actual living creatures do, right? Like they basically exist to fulfill the function of the story. So the idea then with a Dryad specifically, not a Naiad or an Oread, in my thinking, is that they were tales told about yeah, it's exactly like that too, Army Kid. This feels like the premise of all those say it 3 times horror movies. There are definitely some of those like that. There's one we did last time. The Paraton is one of those stories where let me pull it up. It was really cool. I think it was Alan in the chat who had this idea because I was like scratching my head. There's such Paratons are so weird that I was like having a really difficult time like finding a place for them, and we ended up making them Fae. So it's a Fae creature born from the curious nightmare of a child's drawing. A Paraton once created seeks one thing alone: to eat the heart of the child who drew it. Right. So the idea is that, like, you know how kids draw spooky monsters when they're a kid, when they're younger, and so the notion is like, if you draw it and it frightens you enough, they can make the Paraton real, and then at some point it comes back after you to try to eat your heart, and it's this mimetic drawing that like one kid drew it, and then this happened, and they told stories about it, right? So it's this weird self-replicating thing, because then once they saw it, then it made more kids draw it, which made more Paratons. So the Fae are really fun in that way. You get to come up with these, like, what is the narrative behind this monster, as opposed to just, you know, what is to eat. So my thinking with the Dryads is that if you look at Elven mythology on Dune, the elves basically believed oh, interesting. I think we have this backwards. Yeah, let's get rid of this. But the Elven Ancestors. Oh, yeah, sure. Tell us about the Elven Ancestors. So the idea is that in Elven mythology, they believe that they were born from trees, right? Whether or not that's true, we'll see. But the notion was that instead of being shaped from stone, like the dwarves were, or carved from bone, like the orcs were, the elves were born from trees. They believed themselves to be like tree spirits, essentially, come to life. And so this belief and these stories about their kind of primordial origins eventually created the Dryads, these creatures who are bound to trees, right, and cannot leave them, and are sort of like tied to an individual tree. So they're Fae creatures, so they kind of obey story rules. But what's interesting about them, I think this was an idea I had a long time ago, is that they basically live for a single year, each Dryad, that they are born in the spring, and they live out their whole life, and they die in the winter. Elves are like deeply seasonal creatures, in Undune. So the idea with elven culture, and it's a little bit baked into the biology, but the idea with elves is that they live their life in these seasons. So when they're and you can kind of like zoom in and zoom out. So an elf lives for about 1,000 years in Undune, and for the first like 250 years of their life, they're in their spring. A spring elf, you know, they don't have like physical change or anything, but it's kind of about their outlook. Like a spring elf is all about like flirtation and youth, and you know, learning about the world and inexperience. And then a summer elf is all about like romance and passion and sex and you know, sweat and heat. A fall elf is all about like childbirth and raising a family and, you know, that kind of a thing. With some variants of cacti, that's cool. And then a winter elf is all about reflection and isolation and solitude, and then eventually death. And so in elf's life, you can look at those seasons for sure, but then individually you can look at you know, every year elves are like this on the seasons, or then every one of their lifetimes, which are about 100 years, they go through those 4 phases. So I like the idea that the Dryads are like externalizations of this. They literally live and die in a single year and go through those different things. So meeting a Dryad like in the spring is very different from meeting that same Dryad in the autumn, right? Like even though only a couple of months have passed, their whole outlook is different because the tree that they're attached to is very different. So I think they're kind of like living extensions of these trees. Now I'm going to look up and see what the 5th edition Monster Manual has to say, because I'm curious about how they do it and what their like Dryad lore is, and whether any of that is interesting to us and whether we want to incorporate it, or whether we want to go our own way on the Dryad lore. So, Dryads. Travelers entering a forest, blah, 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 tree bound. Powerful Fae will sometimes bind lesser Fae spirits to trees, transforming them into Dryads. This is sometimes done as punishment when the Fae spirit falls in love with a mortal, and that love is forbidden. Okay, interesting. A Dryad can emerge from the tree and travel the lands around it, but the tree remains her home and roots her to the world. As long as the tree remains healthy and unharmed, the Dryad stays forever youthful and alluring. If the tree is harmed, she suffers. If the tree is ever destroyed, the Dryad descends into madness. That's kind of interesting. I like the idea of them being bound to the tree, but there might be ways to free them from the tree or something like that, right? Would there be a generation knowledge stored in each tree for each successive Dryad if they only live a year? That's kind of cool. I like that too, Armor Kid. Let's keep reading. Reclusive Fae. Dryads act as guardians of their woodland domains. Shy and reclusive, they watch interlopers from the trees. A Dryad struck by the beauty of a stranger might investigate more closely, perhaps even try to lure the individual away to be charmed. Dryads work with other sylvan creatures to defend their forests. Unicorns, treants, and satyrs live alongside them, in addition to druids that share the Dryads' devotion to the woods they call home. Okay, sure. Can speak with plants and animals. They can teleport from one tree to another, luring interlopers away from their groves. If pressed, a Dryad can beguile humanoids with her enchantments, turning enemies into friends. They also know a handful of useful spells. So yeah, they have a couple of spells: Druidcraft, Entangle, Goodberry, Bark Skin, Pass Without Trace, Shillelagh, Magic Resistance, Speak with Beasts and Plants. They can do Tree Stride. They have a club attack with Shillelagh, and then they have a Fey Charm that kind of magically charms people. So let's see. We have to kind of incorporate some of those abilities. We can obviously change mechanics too if you want to make it fit our story better. I like the idea the 2 Army Kid proposes that there's a generational knowledge in the tree, that the tree like outlives the Dryad, right? And so it remembers everything that the Dryad remembered. But that I like the notion of the Dryad and the tree being separate creatures, that the Dryad has to sort of like ask the tree for permission. Like the Dryad is almost like the tree's spokesperson, or like their Lorax, right? Like I speak for the tree kind of a thing. That's sort of cool. A fleeting seasonal spirit. The Dryad is the tree's spokesperson. It is bound to the tree and can venture, maybe we'll say like no more than 1 mile away. And it grows, but the further it goes, the weaker it becomes. I like the idea of like that being kind of hand-waved, right? But that like it causes sort of pain and discomfort for the Dryad to be too far away from the tree. The link is very thin. I do like this idea of love being involved in there, and that there being this, because like charm is a power they have, and like the notion of a dryad being separated from a tree, like, inevitably becomes the question, right? Like, how do you, if you say that the dryad is bound to the tree, then it feels like you have to have stories where they are separated, right? That's just like, that begs the question. So I like the notion of like a dryad. I have two ideas. My first idea is that a dryad can leave the tree, but only if it is like in love with someone, right? Who is, you know, leaves the tree or is far away, right? That like a dryad can like unbond itself from the tree if it replaces that bond with a bond to someone else, which I think is kind of cool, right? Like, because it plays with this idea of like romance, and if they are creatures of fairy stories, then that's totally the kind of tale that you would tell, like a Romeo and Juliet or Pyramus and Thisbe thing, where like, you know, an elf loved a dryad, but she couldn't accompany him when he went off to war, and so the dryad, like, you know, left her tree and bound herself to her soldier, and then, like, you know, the soldier died or whatever, and then she died thereafter because the tree died, or however it works, you know. That's kind of cool. My other idea, and they could work differently depending on the dryad. My other idea is that the dryad can only leave the tree if it can replace itself with someone else. And so that's kind of where the charm comes in. The notion of like, if it can trick you into making the bargain with the tree, then, and I don't think it can charm you and say, okay, you have to make the bargain. It can charm you to make itself seem more appealing, right? And to kind of invile its way into your heart, but you still have to willingly agree to bind yourself to the tree, right? And let the dryad go out and experience life. Like, basically the dryad gets your life and you get the dryad's life. I think that's kind of cool. Ooh, and a new tree grew where they died. That's neat. So what do we think? I mean, I kind of think it's cool if it's both, right? That like both versions exist. Because there's like the Hamadryad and stuff. Like, there are different types of dryad. I like the idea of that, of them being different creatures. Like, they're the same creature, but because the story is told in different ways in different places, there are different versions of it. In some versions of the tale, the dryad can only leave the tree. If it falls in love with someone, replacing its bond to the tree with a bond to the person. In other versions of the tale, the dryad can only leave if it can trick, if it can trick another person into pledging themselves to that tree. Oh, I wanted to put that thing about the oh, let's get rid of culture. We don't need both of them. I want to put that thing about the a tree inherits all the knowledge of its previous. Hey, what's up, Vaughn? We're talking about dryads. Inherits all the knowledge of its previous dryads. In some sense, this makes it a repository of lore and knowledge. Ooh, Green Knight is cool. Yeah. So, like, I wonder if a dryad replaces its tree bond with a love bond or whatever, like, does the cyclical thing end? Because I kind of think that's cool, right? That might be a reason to do it, right? Because if you, I mean, there is something tragic about knowing the dryad will die, but maybe the dryad grows old with the person and then dies when they die, right? So if it's like, if the dryad falls in love with a mortal, and the mortal, you know, is a young person, then the dryad ages at the exact same rate as the mortal, and that they die together at the end of their life. And if the person dies violently or dies before then the dryad also dies. They have like a bond in that way. I kind of think that's cool. There is the madness argument, which is interesting, but I wonder if that's maybe more of a story where if the dryad, the other version, where if the dryad tricks somebody into taking its tree bond, then over time that dryad will eventually go mad, right? I mean, I even like the idea maybe that's the origin of hags, or one of the origins of hags, is that they were dryads who like were severed from their trees but still lived, you know, and that kind of drove them crazy. That's interesting. Okay, so in Khûm, what's interesting is that we only have one like big major forest. There are definitely like trees and smaller forests and other things. That it goes by a couple different names throughout the course of its history, but at the time of the campaign, it's called the Shatter Wood. And the idea is that there was a wood elven community that lived here, but then when the Sorrows fell, they fractured into two halves. You have the Dryad, you have the Dryads and Druids. You have the Druids who stuck around and stayed there and kind of devoted themselves to this like sort of fire cult. And then you had the Rangers who left and tried to find a way out of Khûm, right, out of the veil that they were trapped in. And so one group is doomed to stay and one group is doomed to go. And because elven cultures are always based on like couples, like, you know, elven societies are always ruled by a pair. It's kind of this like perennial divorce, right? And they're wandering around, or they're stuck there, kind of devoted to this fire god. So presumably, then we're staying in the forest. If the elves would have told stories in the forest about their origins, then there would be Dryads in the Shatter Wood. But what's interesting is that the trees in the Shatter Wood are all dead, right? So are all the Dryads dead? Are they like weird undead Dryads? Because that's pretty spooky, right? Like, what happens to, I mean, presumably dead trees don't have Dryads, right? I guess. So maybe we don't need to have Dryads in Khûm. We have forests in Khûm, so it feels like we should have Dryads, but it's a dead forest. It could also be that the wandering elves tell stories about them, so you will occasionally find them elsewhere. But Khûm is also in perpetual winter, right? So all the Dryads, if you encountered one, would be old. Yeah, let's maybe say that. When the Seven Sorrows killed oh, here's what we do. Yeah, killed the Shatter Wood. It killed the Dryads with it. The Wandering, I think they're the Kilariel is the term. The Kilariel, or the Wandering Elves. Yeah, I was thinking about undead Dryads might be kind of cool. Are there undead Dryads? The Wandering Elves still told the tales. Ooh, the Wandering Elves still told the tales. And thus, there are scattered Dryads throughout Khûm. As Khûm languishes in eternal winter, the Dryads that remain... I mean, like, you know what? Maybe they didn't die, because maybe we just say that, like, the Dryads... Yeah, here we go. Okay. So we have this fire cult, right? There's a cult of fire in the Shatter Wood among the kind of like wood elves who have lost all hope. So instead of saying that the Dryads are dead, I think we say that the Dryads are stuck in winter, right? They're all these old Dryads. The Dryads, when winter fell in the Shatter Wood, the Dryad, well, because the elves are already stuck in winter. We kind of already have that, right? I was thinking about the idea of, like, you know, there being like the snow melt bringing spring and that like revitalizing the Dryads, but maybe that's different. Ooh, Vaughn makes a great point. Yeah, there we go. Elves are very long-lived. So I don't know if you remember this, Vaughn, but there are a few points in on Dune's like mythology and lore that I can trace to specific people, kind of like I did with Alan and the Paraton. But the idea of elves being seasonal is something that you came up with actually on a stream like a year and a half ago. We were trying to figure out how the elves worked, and you were the one who was saying like, oh, what if they went through like different moods in the different seasons, right? Eternal Winter Dryads, horribly aged, seeking new bonds to escape. Ooh, that's so good. Yeah. So, okay, I think we have a couple of options here. But yeah, Vaughn, you were the one who originally proposed this idea that like every 100 years the elves go through the same cycle, right? Where they have their spring and their summer and their autumn and their winter. Yeah, that's awesome. So, okay. I like the idea of a Dryad being bonded with an elf would still be alive, right? Because the elves are still alive. They're stuck in winter, but they're still alive. Whereas, yeah, when winter fell on the Shatter Wood, the Dryads sensed the death of the trees, and many formed bonds with elves to escape. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, it would make them young again. It would at least make them the age of the elf that they're with, right? But because the elves are all trapped in winter, I wonder if it would make them old too. Like it would let them continue to live, but maybe it would make them young again. That's cool, To Army Kid. I like that. I'll put it as a question. Did this new bond make them young again? This is a great one, you guys. This is probably my favorite one I've done in a long time. Make them young again. I don't know. That's cool. That's an interesting idea. As Khûm languishes in eternal winter, the Dryads that remain are trapped in winter, but as spring returns, new Dryads are beginning to appear. Right? Like spring in the campaign is slowly returning. Ooh, do these Dryads feed blood to trees? I don't know. Ooh, spooky. But spring is coming, right? In the campaign, like spring is slowly beginning to spring. And so the idea of like there being a plot about like, no, there are new Dryads, and you see children, like young Dryads in the forest, and it's this hope of spring and the promise of spring, to borrow a phrase. So yeah, let's go like ancient history is like when for many years there were no Dryads in Khûm. There were no Dryads in Khûm. The coming of the Wood Elves to the Firewood brought their tails and their Dryads with them. We'll start with, that's fine. Okay, cool. That's awesome. So let's talk about hooks, because I think this is where we could get some of those interesting plots, though. Like, so Vaughn asks, do these Dryads feed blood to trees? Right? Yeah, the acorns or pines are still preserved, waiting for spring to flourish. Yeah, that's true. There's pines, definitely. There's pines. I like the idea, though, that like I think we talked about this when we designed the Shatter Wood. Acorns I love, but I think we talked about the notion that like it's too cold for pine trees. Right, that it eventually broke them. That like that's why it's called the Shatter Wood. That like the ice got into the wood and it broke them. Right, so there's all these like splintered, mutilated pine trees in the firewood. Even though they're supposedly evergreen, it's even then still too cold because it's like a supernatural cold. But I love the idea that yeah, there's still some sliver of them alive. They're either like preserved acorns or pine cones or whatever that could sprout once the snow melts, as it is beginning to do in the campaign. But I love Vaughn's idea here about Gulthias trees and Dryads feeding blood to trees, because we have twig blights in this setting, and they are tied to the Shatter Wood. The idea is that there is a where is my blights? I don't have a name of the tree yet. It's called Name. It might be called Winter Splinter. I might just steal that. But there's an undead treant at the heart of the Shatter Wood. It's essentially like a treant revenant. Revatreant. Treevenant's pretty good. And that the blights are coming from the treant, right? And like scattering themselves across Khûm, basically spreading their horrible infection. The Trevenant doesn't mean to, right? But it's doesn't know what it's doing, right? It's this like undead tree. It's trying to like replant the forest, but the trees, the twig blights it's sending out are, just creating more dead evil trees. So I like the idea of the Dryads in some way, like if the elves believe they have to burn the trees, I don't know. That's a great question. I don't know what species of tree it is. I think my original thinking was that the twig blights were kind of like pine or seed clusters, right? They're sending them out like those maples or whatever. But I don't know what kind of species of tree it is. That's a great question. But I like the idea of there being like a belief among the Dryads that, they tried burning wood and that didn't work, right? They're burning wood to keep themselves alive. But what they need to do is they need to replenish the tree. They need to like feed the trees, and maybe that's where the blood comes in, right? So it's like a maddened dryad. A maddened dryad believes feeding blood to the trees will awaken them again. A dryad attempts to convince a player to make a bargain with it. I even like the idea too, not that you couldn't have male dryads, but the idea of black oak, sequoia, walnut, something hard, that's cool. I don't know woods very well. It would have to be kind of like a northern like a northern climb tree, right? If it already existed there in the firewood. Convince the player to swap places with it is what I should say. To swap places with it. To swap places with it. I mean, you could also do like a dryad falls in love with a character. Falls in love with a player character and makes a bond with them. Yeah, that's cool, Vaughn. Maybe it's blood to feed an acorn. That they have like one acorn that's survived. That's neat. I like the idea, whether we use that with the dryads or not, I like the idea of there being like one dryad with the elves who stayed, the druids, the fire druids, who still believes that it can be the forest can be saved, and like goes along with all of this, but doesn't. Yeah, that's cool. Let's go in here and let's go. One dryad bonded with the leading druid and still has hope that the forest can bloom again. She keeps an acorn waiting for the chance to plant it. Cool. And then one more dryad related plot. Something with like a ghost dryad is kind of cool. I like the dryad bonding with the leading druid because the idea with the elves is that they were led by both a ranger and a druid. And it was a romantic relationship, right? In this case, not always, but elves always rule in pairs. And so when that happened, they basically divorced, right? And so like the dryad is almost like the druid's like second spouse or whatever, right? The sort of like rebound. And it could even be a thing where the dryad fell in love with the druid, but the druid didn't love the dryad back. Like, you can get that. You can get this like unrequited love, which I think is cool. That's kind of what that second one is like a dryad falls in love with a player character, makes a bond with them. Okay, great, but I don't know who you are. Like, why are you in love with me? It doesn't have to be reciprocated, right? Because that's very tragic. I need one more dryad, like random encounter or adventure hook to do around a dryad. Because we could just do that it tries to trick them, right? Like, ooh, yeah, let's see. An NPC begs the characters to help them find the dryad. Begs the characters to help them find the dryad who tricked them into accepting the bond. Yeah. It could be a redwood. That's cool. Threat. Charm. Ooh. Dryadlings would be rumored. I like that. Yeah. Ooh, burning tree ghosts are also good. Okay, let's do all of these. Let's go. There's nothing wrong with getting extra ones. Trick them into its bond. Where the characters encounter young dryads in a new growth forest. As spring... Ooh, Lost Monarch is pretty cool. As spring begins, the party encounters young dryads. Childlike dryads in a new growth forest. Spirit ghosts related to burning trees. That's cool. Dryad ghosts. Dryad ghosts, like fire spirits. Believed to be ghosts of Dryads. Ghosts of Dryads haunt the Kilario. The Kilario. Yeah, I like that. A Dryad. So the threat it makes, a Dryad is not a difficult opponent, but instead it may beguile or charm you into accepting an oath. Charm you into accepting an oath. Oath against your interests. Okay, cool. Dryad, done. Got it. Let's scroll down. Nice work, everybody. That's the Dryad. We have several more monsters to do here. There's the Ettercap and the Frostworm. Any ideas which? The Ettercap is kind of a Fae adjacent monster, so we could stick with the Fae, keep doing that, or we could get a change of pace and we do the Frostworm. If there's another monster on this list you guys are interested in, the Cave Fisher, the Dragazar, the Gaspor, the Griffin, the Ogre, the Oni. I don't know why the Oni is on there, honestly. I might take the Oni off, because it doesn't feel particularly dwarven. That saves us a little time. The Quaggoth, the Sprite, and the Yeti, let me know. But the two I had on the poll were the Ettercap and the Frostworm. Any preferences between those? The Frostworm I've run before. The Ettercap, I have a little bit of ooh, the Dryads attack PCs who gather wood to burn. They could. I don't think there are enough of them to make that would happen. You know, but it could. I mean, it's a random encounter. Like, that's the point. It's like it's a unique event. Two Army Kid says Ettercap. Cool. I actually really like the Ettercap narrative that we have in On Dune. We just have the initial seed of it, but it'd be cool to kind of flesh it out. So Ettercaps probably live in the forest as well. And they are Fae adjacent. The idea is that when a giant spider catches and eats a Fae creature, they absorb a tiny sliver of their magic. A spider who develops an appetite for Fae becomes an Ettercap, right? So they were originally giant spiders, but because they've kind of started to glut themselves on Fae, that's what turned them into an Ettercap. I believe that the Ettercap here in the 5th edition Monster Manual makes a point about them being enemies of the Fae, but I kind of wanted to take that a step further. So let's read this. Ettercaps are humanoid spiders that feed, tend, and watch over spiders the way a shepherd oversees a flock of sheep. They lair deep in remote forests. Fine strands of silk stream from glands. Quiet killers. Travelers and explorers venture into an Ettercap's territory. The Ettercap stalks them. Some meet their end, wandering blindly into traps or sections of forest enclosed by webs. Others, the Ettercap garrots with silk strands, or envenoms with its poisonous bite. Though they dwell in the wilds, Ettercaps have no desire to live in harmony with nature. A forest infested with Ettercaps transforms into a gloomy place, choked with webs and infested with giant spiders, giant insects, and other sinister predators. Creatures who wander too far into such a wood are soon lost in a maze of webs that dangle with the bones and lost treasures of the Ettercap's victims. This stuff I really like. I love giant spiders. I'm a big Shelob fan, and so I think the reason that I like Shelob is less because I super like spiders. Like, spiders are cool, but it's the way she gets treated in the story. That she is this like ancient evil thing that has dwelled in the high passes of Mordor since like a time before Sauron, right? And there's like a reverence that Shelob is given, and the amount of time that she gets in the story, like it makes you, the fact that she survives, it makes you realize like how big and deep the world is. Like, if you know about the Ungoliant and the Silmarillion, okay, it kind of ruins it. But what's nice about Shelob is that like she's right on that awesome border of being like a monster, yes, but having a little bit of like agency and personality and intelligence, right? So I think the Ettercap has always been attracted to me because I like the idea of the like, you know, the Ettercap has 7 intelligence. It's not dumb, but it's not smart either. It lives in this kind of middle space. And then they're described as being the enemies of the Fae. Ettercaps are natural enemies of Fae creatures. The foul creatures set web snares to catch sprites and pixies, which they hungrily devour, and will encase a Dryad's tree in webbing in a vain attempt to trap the Dryad. Otherwise, timid fae will sometimes approach outsiders for help in dealing with an Ettercap infestation, being ill-equipped to deal with the malevolent creatures themselves. She's so creepy. I love Shelob. Mwah. She fought with Smaug? When? When did that happen, chat owner? I don't remember that story at all. I'll have to look that up. But the idea here is that an Ettercap is a spider that has gorged too much on the Fae and like kind of swallowed some of that story energy. So they aren't Fae themselves. They have like Fae magic kind of, but there are no stories necessarily told about Ettercaps. They are just spiders that catch Fae creatures. Because Fae tend to live in forests and things like that. So let's copy this over. I don't think they have a culture per se, because I think they tend to be kind of like solitary creatures. Yeah, it makes a terrible wake up. You watch the movies and it's 2 a.m, for sure. Oh, she's on the side of Smaug. Gotcha. I thought you meant like she fought against Smaug. I was like, what fanfic is that? I don't think she would win that fight, but yeah, she's great. I love Shelob. One of my favorite characters in Lord of the Rings. Smaug, I think, is actually another really good character in that degree too, where he is also intelligent but really not, right? Like he can speak and things like that, but he's kind of a dumb dragon. What's up, Jose? I actually don't have the Feywild in my setting. I don't have other planes. My Fey kind of work a little differently. So let's talk about them. They don't have a culture, but let's maybe do... Yeah, we'll do culture. It's not quite right, but Ettercaps are solitary creatures. And see other Ettercaps as nothing more than competition. Right? Like, the chances of this happening are pretty minimal. But like, I almost like them as like Fae, like vampires, where like they have to eat Fae. They can't eat anything else. Yeah, like they are so specialized of hunters that they can't eat anything but Fae creatures. Well, yeah, of this, it's kind of like a vampire like on chicken blood, right? Smaug got lazy once Sauron was unringed. Agreed. They're so specialized in hunters that they disdain any meal not made from, or not any non-Fae meal. Any meal other than a Fae creature. That like they will do it, but they hate it, right? Fae creature. Maybe, but again, I don't have a Feywild in my setting, unfortunately. All the Fae come from the real world. Great. They're so specialized in hunters that they disdain any meal other than a Fae creature. They herd spiders. That's pretty common, right? I'm trying to figure out what's their deal in Fae Tastes Like Home. I'm trying to figure out makes them immortals. They can't die of starvation. Ooh, yeah. They cannot die of starvation. I think they're all picky eaters because I don't think there are that many. I like the idea of them kind of being like mind flayers and that they develop little cuisine tastes for stuff, right? Like some of them like pixies more than sprites. Some of them like dryads. Some of them like this or that or that or that, right? That like they end up with these, or it's like an increasing taste. Because I feel like the thing they're most likely to catch is like a sprite or a pixie, like a little winged creature that could get caught in a web. And then once they eat one, then it kind of becomes this thing of like, well, wait, now I want another one. Now I want a bigger one, right? Like what is a dryad? Like what is an elf if not another creature, right? They cannot die of starvation, but nonetheless starve of starvation for their magical nature makes them immortal. That's awesome fun. Makes them immortal. But they nonetheless feel starvation. Feel hunger. Yeah, it gives them a drive to seek them out. That's cool. So I have some spiders in my setting. I have some like snow spiders that are like basically just spiders. They have like an ice web kind of a thing, right? Where their web is it's like they're from a much older edition. I don't know why I don't have them here, but I did them for my random encounters. I should maybe port them over. But I still like the idea that they like herd spiders, right? That's definitely still a thing. They breed and herd spiders. They breed and herd spiders to help in their hunt. Yeah, I like the idea that it's like it's like a multi-level marketing scheme, right? So it's like they they like farm out these spiders and they like get them to set up webs, right? And the spiders will catch stuff. And if it's not a fae, then ooh, that's cool, Jose. They make it have a kind of a larder. It separates wings from eyes from other parts. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah. And they make little like fetishes and clothing out of the fae items, like fae teeth and stuff. Ugh. But I like the idea that they would breed spiders and they would send giant spiders out to catch things, and anything that the spiders catch that aren't fae they can eat. But yeah, Addercop. I think it probably is, yeah. Because it's Addercop in The Hobbit, right? That's one of the reasons I really wanted them in Khûm, even though it doesn't quite make sense, is because The Hobbit is such an inspiration for this series, for this campaign, that I really wanted, like, any of the Hobbit stuff I can get in there, right? So I've got dragons, and I've got shapeshifters, and I've got some goblins, maybe not as much as I should. And I've got giant spiders. I've got giant eagles are in there, right? I've got wargs in a prominent place. Like, there's some trolls, maybe not tons of them. I had to get elves, like wood elves specifically. Oh no, you don't like horror. You don't like spiders, huh? But yeah, like I like the idea of them using the reason that they breed giant spiders isn't just because like I'm a spider guy. More spiders for me is that like they use them as a means to catch more fae, right? They keep gruesome larders where they store prized fae parts, as they're so hard to come by. Yeah, I like that. Okay, so I don't think they existed in like. There were vanishingly few fae in Khûm before the elves arrived, and thus there were no ettercaps in Khûm to hunt them. Well, guess what, my man? Vaughn says it's odd that they don't have have an ability to charm spiders. They don't even have animal handling. Well, guess what? They're about to speak to spiders. The give them an ability like gnomes to speak and charm spiders. Done. Easy. Good thinking. I don't have a Tom Bombadil Shadow. I guess he doesn't appear in The Hobbit. It's not necessarily super inspired by Lord of the Rings, but there's got to be like a Tom Bombadil character in on Dune for sure. There's got to be some kind of a fae, almost like a Robin Goodfellow kind of a trickster, right? Like definitely. But I don't know that that's necessarily a big touchstone from The Hobbit. Seven Sorrows. So then, but the elves did arrive. Like they brought them with, right? When the elves came, yeah. So actually, we didn't do this. We would do when the elves came to Khûm. They brought fae with them. So this is actually perfect because sprites, we haven't talked about them yet, but the concept behind sprites is that they are essentially a story that elven parents would tell their children about behaving. That like the elven parents would make up these little guardian spirits called sprites that would follow the children around and make sure that they, didn't misbehave. And the kids believed that enough that it made these little creatures, which, again, I think are written as like these humorless protectors, be real. So that, theoretically, that every elven child would have a sprite, and that's the kind of thing that the Ettercaps would be feasting on, right, are these little sprites. When the elves came to Khûm, they brought their fae, sprites, pixies, dryads, with them, and that attracted, and that in turn created Ettercaps. The spiders set up shop after the Shatter Wood was formed, and they fed off the druids, dryads, and other fae who lingered. Yeah, I think that the spiders existed before, because I have, like, snow spiders, but I don't think that the Ettercaps did, because there weren't fae. they might have existed before the Shatter Wood because there would have been elves there, but not for that long. And my question is, like, when the winter comes and the druids kind of the elves kind of stop telling stories, do the Ettercaps like turn to the elves and start eating them? Like, I think that's kind of cool, right? That like when the Fae grew scarce during the sorrows, the Ettercaps began to hunt and kill the elves. Because, like, you can make that point that elves have Fae ancestry, right? So, like, they have a little bit of that story magic in them, more than, like, dwarves or orcs necessarily do, right? So that, like, it's not the same, but it's, like, a little hit of that magic, right? Even as weak as their Fae influence is. Oh, that's actually kind of today, right? That's now. Yeah, let's do this. Oh no, because it wouldn't be Seven Sorrows. So there really isn't like something. They didn't like necessarily react to the Seven Sorrows, but that's enough. So what are some hooks for them? I'm thinking Ettercap's threat is combat, right? I think so. Combat. An Ettercap is a dangerous ambusher, but only to some. They have no interest in creatures. Ooh, I love that. Yeah. Ettercaps take on the season of the Fae they eat. Ettercaps take on the season of the Fae they eat. Spring, summer, autumn, or winter. That's cool. Ooh, follow the sound of us. Yeah, that's right. The characters encounter a... Ooh, they capture and poison the elves? Oh, no. An elf the characters know has gone missing and is held prisoner by an Ettercap. This is horrible. Encounter a sprite in a web, crying for help. Crying for help. The spiders descend. Cool. Ooh, an Ettercap offers to trade. It's totally the fly. Offers to trade for information on elves or fae. Like, it offers them something, right? In any other character. Because, like, if the party is going to be all dwarves. Like, we might have guests that come in and play non-dwarves, but the party are entirely dwarves. So I love the idea of an Ettercap, like, offering to help the party or give them something if they can tell them, like, hey, did you see where those elves went? Or do you know anything about the elves? Or can you get me closer to the elves? Right? Like, they presumably won't listen to it, but I like the idea of that, of, like, the Ettercap was like, I have no beef with you. I don't want to eat dwarves. Dwarves are disgusting, right? And any other characters except those with Fae ancestry. Yeah. Cool. Love it. Dig it. Awesome. That's Ettercaps. Very nice, guys. Let's do the Frostworm. The least popular kid on the kickball team, the Frostworm. Frostworms, I think, are actually kind of cool because they like straddle this interesting line between like Remorazes and purple worms. There's not a lot of lore to them either, which I think kind of makes them fun. I might want to look up my hooks for the Frostworm because I feel like that might give us something. So if you don't know, a Frostworm is essentially like a gigantic... Oh, the pet spiders have to eat too, that's true. But they can eat... I guess that's true. They could be fed to one of the other spiders. That's a good point. That's a good point, Vaughn. Seven Sorrows. So Frostworm is kind of like a mix between a purple worm and a Remoraz. Yeah, too tough and ornery, and not magical enough, right? Like, yeah, Ettercaps don't care about dwarves. Ugh, tastes like leather. Let me pull up my hooks and see what we can get, or at least my random encounters, if that gives us any kind of a. Because the hooks and random encounters are actually different. I shouldn't be conflating them, but it might give us some clues about what I've already developed for the Frostworm. But it's basically like a big, dumb, slithering monster. Kind of think like the sandworm, except it doesn't have like a huge mouth like a purple worm. It's got like a pair of pincers. It has a breath weapon, and which is a cold breath, and its main ability is that it has like a trill that like stuns you. So it makes like this weird insectile kind of noise, right? And it freezes you in place. It's kind of how the Frostworm works mechanically. When I ran one recently, because it was like a random encounter on the way to go fight a dragon, I changed the way the breath weapon worked, so it wasn't just like 2 breath weapon monsters. I gave it a bloodied breath, and I also gave it a death throes ability, where when it died, it burst because there was like so much cold contained within. It also had a power where when you hit it with a weapon, you took a little bit of cold damage. And that was kind of its big damage dealer, was that like, sure, the barbarian can get up there and mix it up with the Frostworm, but it will, every time he hits it, it will splash back at him. Okay. So here are the 3 random encounters that I have with them, but they aren't necessarily like hooks in their own right. But I'll put them in just to show you. And then I can delete them from here because they belong somewhere else. Random encounters. And they're pretty generic. Like that doesn't really reveal much about their lore or anything. Yeah, my Frostworm was much lower CR. I did a homebrew version. It was like CR 10, I think. Yeah, they're serious. So here are my 3 random encounters. I think I was going to use this one, but the party blundered into the encounter instead. So I just kind of did it. You just turn around the corner and here comes the Frostworm. The characters cross a field of gaping holes, punch through the ice. The holes can be smashed through by an enormous Frostworm. So usually like out on the ice flows. The characters need to make a dexterity stealth check or else draw the worm's ire. Pretty normal. While camping, the characters are frozen in place by the trilling of an enormous Frostworm, rising to feast on their stunned forms. Standard encounter. And then 2 enormous monsters, a Frostworm and a Remoraz, do battle up ahead. The characters need to tread carefully to avoid getting wrapped up in the battle. So those are kind of the generic random encounters. That doesn't really tell us much. Rather than Frostwormling. Rather than a... Yeah, right, if it's CR10. Not quite the full beast. Let's do description here. A mindless monster, Frostworm, has a number of deadly powers. It can, it exudes cold. A freezing cold that damages anyone who strikes it. When killed, the Frostworm explodes into icy shards. So, like, it almost feels more elemental to me than it does, like, an actual monster. Like, I think it is a monster, but they've got, like, 1 intelligence, and, like, they're, like, if the idea is that they're just, like, so cold, right, that they're almost, like, living ice, you know? I've described them as having skin and stuff when they appear, so they can't be, like, an actual elemental. But they don't feel natural, right? It feels like a, I don't want to do a wizard did it, right? But, like, it feels supernatural to me. Like, elemental. I'm trying to figure out, like, I don't necessarily care about its origin so much, but it doesn't feel like a natural creature. Trying to think. They feel like the opposite of a Remoraz, right? It feels like a creature that, the Remoraz is all about heat and internal heat, and the Frostworm is all about internal cold, right? I like them being competitors, right? Like, they compete with the with the Remorazes. Its deadliest power is its trill. Which stuns humanoids. It does do elemental leakage. Is that a thing? I don't remember. Let me pull it up in 5th edition. When It stuns, which stuns unsuspecting humanoids. Unsuspecting humanoids. Okay. I'm going to pull up the Frostworm and take a look, because I don't know how they did it in 5th. I just took a Remoraz and reflavored it, because I didn't know that they had reprinted it in 5th edition. Frostworm. Yeah, maybe Wildmount will have information about it. That's cool. Yeah, it does have the freezing body. Okay, that's what I thought. Oh, I never liked this picture, because this just makes it look like a purple worm. You know? Mine has, like, the big pincers. This one has the bite. Oh, yeah, and it swallows it. It swallows you. So it's just a purple worm. I see. These enormous monstrosities eagerly consume any living creature they can wrap their jaws around. Man, if I had really thought about this, then I would have probably done it more like a purple worm. Yeah, it does have a death burst and a freezing body. Okay. But the 3rd edition one had a breath weapon. The 3rd edition one on the CRD is lower CR, if I remember correctly. Oh, I love the art for the 3rd edition one, too. CR 12, Trail of Cold, and it has a breath weapon. Let me find the art. I want to share it in the chat, because I always loved the 3rd edition Frostworm art. It just has such a weird face that I always really dug. Yeah, here it is. Check it out. I think the implication with this one, too, is that it has a rattle, which I think is pretty cool. Like, if you look back there at its tail. But I still think it's got the one eye up there and then, like, these weird meaty jaws. Like, it's just a weird-looking monster. It doesn't look like a purple worm. Where it feels like the 5th edition one is supposed to kind of be like a cold version of a purple worm. Which, like, there's maybe an argument to that being its origin in Khûm, because purple worms were, like, bred by one of the dwarven clans, right, to help them burrow. So maybe that's the origin here, but that's not how I described it when it appeared, and now it's already appeared. So, like, I can't go back, right? The Frostworm. What is its deal? It doesn't like Remorazes, we know that. It competes for prey with Remorazes. Remorazes. And the two fight fiercely when they meet. Have I done the Remoraz? I must have. Oh, it didn't load? Oh, no, I'm sorry. Well, if you just Google Frostworm 3.5, you'll find the picture. Sorry, the link didn't load. Okay, so what did I say? An Arctic insectile predator, the Remoraz hunts its prey by heating its body and bursting through ice from below. A Remoraz carries its eggs to turn when they hatch. The young eat their way out of their mother. Yeah, that's right. A Remoraz will heat its body to loosen the ice above it and plunge its prey into the freezing water. They are prized by frost giants, not merely as guards, but by a means to enter the afterlife. They molt, heating their body until the carapace cracks, exposing soft flesh. While in the process, they are somewhat squishier and their armor class goes down. Yeah, that's cool. Lower AC while molting. There were no Remorazes in Ancient Khûm. The weather was too warm. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm not sure why I did that. Seven Sorrows, the Remoraz came with the Frost Giant, so they brought them in. Okay, so then we say that the Remoraz, that the Frostworm is the natural Arctic predator of Khûm, right? And then the Remoraz was introduced. Ooh, could the Frostworm have eaten Sacristeel or eat something that freezes it? It could. Sacristeel wouldn't freeze it, but I don't hate the idea of it, like, eating a weird metal or something like that. That's kind of interesting. But to me, it feels like ecologically, right, that the Remoraz is introduced. So the Frostworm was the biggest Arctic predator, and then the Remoraz came in, and now they're in competition. So there's a story there for sure. I do kind of want to figure out, like, why are they so damn cold? Like, what is that about? And it could be something they eat. I don't hate that idea, Vaughn. I think we could get there. I don't know what it would be, because Sacristeel isn't inherently colder, and it's also really deep, right? So these guys are kind of on the surface. But I don't think the idea of them eating something that makes them cold is bad at all. It's just a question of what. The original apex predator of Khûm, the Frostworm now competes for prey with the newly introduced Remorazes. Cool. Yeah, why are they so cold? It's a magic weapon wedged in its plates, yeah. But it wouldn't work for everyone, you know? Yeah, I'm trying to think. What could it be? Damn, I don't know. I don't know. Well, let's do some history. Before the coming of the Frost Giants, the Frostworm was the apex predator. The one creature all of Khûm feared to encounter when the Remorazes were introduced to Khûm, were introduced by the Frost Giants, were introduced during the Sorrows. They regular diet of Yetis? Yeah, it could be, I guess. That's true. It loves to eat Yetis. I mean, that's not the worst idea, honestly, because like Yetis have like a cold power, right? Yetis are magical. They just feel like they're elemental in some way, right? Like they don't feel like they're normal creatures. I don't want to do a wizard did it. You know what I mean? Like that seems too easy. But like there does seem to be like they do seem like a polar variant of the purple worm, you know? They just have these way different powers, and they're so cold internally. It ate a white dragon egg? Yeah, maybe. Unfortunately, there were no white dragons here at that time. Yeah. Yetis, white dragons. I'm trying to think if there's like something that it eats that's like a material that it would have access to. Because like white dragon eggs just wouldn't be that common, you know? They had to sustain an entire species on them and them alone. I don't know. Ooh, what about this? So it's a little magical, but what if the idea is that it digests extremely slowly, like a sarlacc, right? And so why it's so cold inside is that when it eats you, you don't die. It's so like cold in its body that it freezes you and preserves you in there. So if you go into the body of a frostworm, right, you find all the kills of the frostworm, like winter wolves could work too, like preserved and held on the inside of its like, you know, form. And then like it melts them, like the closer they get to the back of the frostworm, it melts them and eats them. Right, because it takes so long for it to digest that like it's basically it's got a fridge inside of it, right? It stores its food inside its own like super chilled body, because then it feels like it's something that evolved for an evolutionary reason, not something magical or something that it eats, right? Because like not that it couldn't eat winter wolves or dragon eggs or yetis, those are all cool, but it couldn't just eat those and exist as a predator. If there was one frostworm, okay, sure, but if it's like a species, right, that doesn't make any sense. Because they're all great ideas. It's just, you know, I gotta make it work with what I've already done. That's the problem. If I could just like go from scratch, I would do a totally different thing. But I love the idea of, yeah, they have like an internalized fridge. The frostworm digests. I'm like, does this matter? No. But the notion of fighting one and seeing all that stuff is pretty cool. Digests its prey very slowly. Almost makes you want to give it swallow, right? I know the Wildmount version has swallow, and so it must preserve its food by freezing it. The inside of a frostworm's belly is full of frozen prey, glued or like full of flash frozen creatures lining the walls of its intestines. When it finishes digesting one meal, it freezes the next. So most of the time it's like in torpor, right? But it only comes out once it's burned through the prey it has. It goes into, and it replaces it with another one. And it has multiple prey because it doesn't know when it'll be able to eat, right? If it's like a serpent, it spends most of its time in torpor. They gobbled up all the prey. Yeah, and I love that too, that like the Frostworm runs cold, right? So it doesn't need to eat that often if it's more like a python. Where like a Remoraz is like a cockroach, like it runs hot, so it's constantly eating, and so the Remoraz is eating all the prey that the Frostworm would normally be eating, right? That like, and because they did that, and the Frostworms are so slow that the Remorazes like ate all the prey before the Frostworms could even really like react, right? Gobbled up all the prey. Ooh. Brown mold is great. Yeah, there you go. Is lined with brown mold. Ugh. I think it's brown mold. Flash freezing. That's awesome, Vaughn. Flash freezing. Its prey onto the walls of its intestines. I just like the idea of being swallowed by a cryovolcano. I love the idea of being swallowed by one, right? And then seeing like other people like frozen down its belly, right? Like, oh no, that's where I'm going. So you can make a new, let's put redesign. Like they have a swallow ability. And the power, like rather than give them swallow, that deals cold damage rather than acid. If this damage reduces you to 0, you're frozen, you're petrified inside the worm's body. Right? Brown mold. Bingo bango. Nice. Gobbled up all the prey the frostworms would normally eat. Awakening from torpor. Like, now... with food scarce, the two predators compete, and the frostworms are definitely on the back foot. So a hook immediately that is suggested to me then is that like the party must rescue a character swallowed by a frostworm, right? That like they're still inside the frostworm, and it's a matter of going and getting it. And like they could even be a character from like an earlier epoch if that's how slow the frostworm is to digest, right? Okay, let me do a summary real quick while you guys think of some more hooks. The formerly the apex predator of Khûm, the frostworm is a bizarre Arctic hunter that freezes its prey inside its own body. To preserve it for later digestion. Very weird. What a weird monster. I love that. So, one hook could just be that the party has to kill a frostworm, right? Or that a frostworm, like... I think, like, because the hooks are tricky, because they're not necessarily all encounters, or whole adventures, right? It's kind of a mix between the two. Definitely it's a combat threat. Combat. A frostworm attack is no joke. They... borrowing from Vaughn's phrasing a little bit there, is no joke. Powerful as they are, death is not the end. As the body, as the prey survives in the stomach for hundreds of years before digestion. Ooh, whole wagon loads of goods? Yeah, that's cool. Before digestion. So let's do, I don't think it's an entirely different hook, but I love the idea. Oh yeah, let's do it this way. When killed, the frostworm's body regurgitates a caravan's worth of valuable goods. Ooh, I like that one. A caravan of valuable goods. Yeah, that's great. Two army kit. I like that one too, Shadowner, where like a Frostworm's worm blocks a tunnel with its ice burrow. So it makes its lair somewhere, right? Or the party comes across. Ooh, what about this? The party. We can do both. The party stumbles across a Frostworm in torpor. And must avoid provoking it. That's cool. Yeah, there's the Frostworm. All right, guys, nice work. This was a really good stream. Owlbear was good up front. I like the pelt thing we talked about with the Owlbear. All right, let's go through it. The Owlbear, we talked about them having a pelt while keeping a lot of the 5th edition lore, which I think is cool. And then we talked about the Dryad. And I think it was maybe my favorite one because it had the most cool like story possibilities from it. We talked about their kind of fate origin and how they're tied to stories. We also came up with this idea of them falling in love with humans and the kind of like bond swap. We talked about the idea of them tricking humans. We talked about the idea of like what happens when all the trees die. Are they maddened? Do they try to sacrifice people? Do they become ghosts? We talked about the Ettercaps a little bit and how they're kind of like Fae gourmands and they only eat Fae. We talked about why they keep spiders and what that's all about and how they could maybe even be potential, not like allies, but like interesting relations with the party that isn't just combat. And then lastly, we kind of cracked the Frostworm, which I was kind of a difficult monster. But I think we really found an awesome, interesting place for it because it gives you these really weird traits and abilities. I wish that I had... I wish that I had known this when I ran the Frostworm because then they could have gotten like some loot and some treasure when it died, right? But I think it makes sense that it was only CR10 because it was like an adolescent worm. So maybe that's why it was young and hadn't eaten a whole lot. I know we have 15 minutes left. I think I'm going to call it there. I'm feeling good where we are right now. Those were the 4 monsters I set out to do today. So I think I might call a stream at that. But it was really nice to get back to it. It felt so good to be back and talking about this stuff. I have this anxiety about it right now where it feels to me like I am quickly approaching a threshold where I don't need to keep doing these streams anymore. But you know what? Let me talk about this for a second. So I've been worried for a while that I'm overdeveloping Khûm because, most campaign worlds that I run don't get this amount of attention. I don't get to spend 2 years beforehand doing these like long 2-hour projects where I sit down and flesh out every minor little detail. Like, it's fun to do. I love doing it. It's not like I don't like doing it anymore. But I'm worried that it is eventually going to damage my ability to run the game if the world is this developed. So what's been really nice, actually, is the fact that in my home game right now, the players have come to Khûm on kind of unrelated business. Like, that game is like a traveling, Black Company, the Chain of Acheron mercenary company. And they took a contract in Khûm to come kill some dragons for the Dwarven Queen at the time. But that is set like 1,500 years before the campaign begins, like this campaign does, right? And I was kind of like a little testing ground. Like, can I do this? Can I run in Khûm? Is Khûm too fat? And I've actually found that it's right now, it's almost like the perfect balance. That time period is a little bit less developed, which helped. But what was nice was that I was able to look at the campaign's needs. The game's called the Menagerie. The Menagerie's needs and who my characters were and what was going on. And I was able to take a plot from their kind of story and bring it to Khûm and have that work. But I was also able to have my main plot. And then, in addition, because I had done so much historical work on the kingdom, I could look at that period and say, okay, what was going on then, right? Only 10% is developed. Oh my gosh. What was going on then? Can I incorporate that into the plot? And I could. There's this whole conspiracy with this like rising corrupt church called the Mystriarchy that I'm incorporating right now into the campaign, and it's working really well. And so it really kind of showed me that like this development has made the stories that I'm running in Khûm a lot more complex and a lot more interesting. Like, if it was just come here and kill some dragons plus maybe deal with some backstory stuff, that would be fine. But because Khûm is politically sophisticated, I was able to incorporate these other plot lines. Like, I think the last stream we did was about Clan Bracebow, which is a small underclan that the characters are about to go meet. And what's cool about that is that, like, because we spent that time, now there is a complex political story there that isn't just, okay, we're the Crossbow clan. It's like, this is our relationship to you and our relationship to the queen and why this is going on. So my point is this was a really nice, like, validation of the work that we've been doing here on the streams, that it does feel like it is helping me run adventures in Khûm. Whether, you know, the fact that that campaign is 15 years before this one will help or not, I don't know, but it felt good to be there and to look at the map and know what everything was. Like, if someone pointed to a corner and was like, oh man, you know, what is the Dale of Discards? I can say, well, it's this, and this is the history of it, and this is blah, 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 right? Like, knowing the world, knowing Khûm as well as I do now, it really helps me run there. Yeah, exactly, Vaughn. The prep that makes you more comfortable to improvise. Exactly. You can always call an audible and play. I think my fear is that I will end up in a scenario where I'm so wedded to the lore that I'm not able to call an audible. But you have to just keep in mind that, like, the party story comes first rather than, like, the things you've written, right? Like, Aaron Sorkin has this, you know, say what you will about him, but he has this masterclass that I was watching, and he talks about the idea of people writing backstory for characters that never makes it to the screen, and that he is this kind of literalist in terms of, like, a character. If a character says, like, I played baseball as a kid, they don't play baseball as a kid until they say that line, right? It's not like they have always played baseball for a kid, and if that line gets cut from the movie, then they never played baseball as a kid. You know what I mean? That kind of a thing. I think that's very true with prep. It's like, it's only true if it hits the table. It's not true if you thought of it and you don't mention it. It is only true if it informs an action, either that you take or that the players interact with, right? So, like, my Frostworm, for example, like, we found a way to make it work in the sense that the Frostworm they fought was a juvenile Frostworm, and so didn't have a lot of things frozen inside its body. The characters were also in the middle of a chase sequence, so they didn't really have time to pick over the corpse. But if we hadn't come up with this, then that would have been the case. What the characters encounter is what's canon, not what you make up on your own. Shadowrunner says, when you put writing down for over 10 years, when the players moved on, you can set up a new part that was untouched. Yeah, exactly. And, you know, the idea with Undoon is it's a world, you know, it's all these continents and all these different time periods. It is actually kind of fun to sketch out, like, this is the beginning and end of the world, because then I can pick, like, okay, let's go here, and let's go here, and let's go here. One of the fun things about the published adventures is that whenever one comes out, right, I always look at it and I say, like, okay, where do I set this? You know what I mean? Like, if somebody comes to me and says, oh man, I want to run this, or I want to play that, or if there's a published adventure that I want to run in on Dune, where do I set it? You know, I have a big city that would be great for Dragon Heist, and there's like a frozen north, not Khûm, but a different place that would be good for Rime of the Frost Maiden. You know, and you would have to toy with things and play with them and make them work, but I love being able to have a world big enough to say, okay, here's Chult, and here's Waterdeep. You know, there are some of them that wouldn't work so well. Like, I probably couldn't do Witchlight very well, and I probably couldn't do Avernus that well, because I don't have really a lot of planar activity in my games. But I think I'm pretty comfortable that almost any other story could be plopped in, like, if you're willing to do some you know, moving and shaking. But anyway, we're pretty off topic. I think this is a great monster stream. Thanks for coming, everybody. I'm so excited to be back and doing this. I'm hoping that next week, although I think I have to miss Thursday, but I'm hoping that I can finally be back into my streaming schedule and, you know, doing multiple weekly streams, especially with the new gaming stream we added on Saturday. So speaking of, if you enjoyed this stream, please consider subscribing to the channel if you're not already. Click that red button down there, and even the bell if you want to get notified when we go live or post new videos. I post a lot of content here on the channel. The next thing you should see from me will be on Tuesday. We are doing oh yeah, Shadowrunner, that's totally right. The Wandering Isle of the Turtles was established for that game, for the Hall of the Hornwinder, the prequel campaign we ran to Helm Crown. Shadowrunner's character was Turtle, and we hadn't figured out where turtles are from in the world, and so we came up with is it Xantara is the name of the island, right? The Wandering Island in the south? Yeah, totally. That kind of stuff is what's lovely, right? Is saying, where in my world are Tabaxi from? And what is the story of the Yuan Ti? And, you know, what about Goliaths and this and that and that? I love doing that stuff. That's great. It's like Keith Baker said, if it exists in D&D, there's room for it in Undoon. But you can find me here Tuesday. We'll be doing adventure prep. I'm not sure what we're going to work on. It'll probably be either my new Theros campaign or my new Ravenloft campaign. Probably Theros, although I'm not sure. We'll see. One of those two will end up on Tuesday here at 2 p.m. PST as we'll do some adventure prep. I am unfortunately taking a day off on Thursday to go have a date with my wife, so I will not be doing my normal, regularly scheduled Monster Workshop stream on Thursday. That'll be off. But then next Saturday, I'll be gaming again, probably around 4 p.m. And then Sunday, we'll be back with another world building stream. If you can't wait that long, you can follow us on Twitter. I'm at ProDMTimothy on Twitter. You can find me on Discord and Patreon. The links are all below. Go check that stuff out. I want to specifically plug our Discord right now because our Discord is a great community and it's really nice and small. And I've been finding that a lot of the Discords I've been visiting have gotten so big that it's hard to like participate. You know, there's a lot of RPGs and communities that I enjoy, but I can't hang out in their Discords because there's just thousands of people and it's just too many. You know, I like our small little Discord with its 50 or so people because, you know, you can have sustained conversations with people. You get to know them better than just like this feed that I can't keep track of. Otherwise, thank you so much for coming, everybody. We will be back next week with another world building episode. I will try to get my map ready. I would love to do the Khûm map episode because I want to show off my big fancy new map. But until then, thank you so much for coming. And of course, as always, happy adventuring. Thanks, guys.